all of this apologia for suffering in the world, the idea that it's good actually because it's gonna give you a special dog treat in heaven, this doesn't actually get us anywhere. It doesn't help anybody in the here and now, and I would honestly say that this kind of rhetoric is traumatic. Now that Chad is done suffering with my Goofy and Mickey voices, because of course they are, they will never be done suffering with those voices. Let's be honest with one another. Let's go ahead and get the next round of suffering started. As we listen to a dude talk about suffering. The dude's name is John Piper, I think. And he's going to talk about us suffering and why that's a good thing. Honest. Really, really, truly, honestly. Before we do that, let's get into something that's not suffering. Let's get to the fan art section. This one is from Dame of Flowers or Dame of Flowers, one of the two. It is a work in progress piece, so we will see another version of it later on down the road. The next one we have is from Rosalind Faye. Said an incomplete concept for a collar for the witch and maid outfits. Suffering like olives? Yes. Cladams, thank you very much for gifting a tier 1 sub to Axolotls with cream. The next one we have is from Pingu. And they said, hello, I only entered the server for this. Cookie Suris. It is Suris, as what looks to be a gingerbread cookie. You know what? I just realized that Dame of Flowers, one of the two, actually has the finished version of that artwork right next. I'm going to go ahead and just show it now. Because it's literally, it's right there. It's right there, and it looks fantastic. They said, done, but kind of rushed because I can't procrastinate on my homework forever. You know what? I wouldn't even say it looks rushed. It just looks fucking good. It is amazing. Forget a gingerbread Suris. How about a stinky cheese Suris? What the fuck? That's like profile pic worthy right there. Easily. Easily. As always, everybody, if you want your fan art to be submitted or to be shown on an episode, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about why none of our misery is meaningless by this dude.
Not only is all your affliction momentary, not only is all your affliction light in comparison to eternity and the glory there, but all of it is totally meaningful.
Things somebody who has a terrible life has to say to themselves in a desperate attempt to make it feel like they can keep on going. And I say that entirely with my chest. Usually when people are saying things like this, oh, well, my situation isn't as bad as others. My situation isn't as bad in the scope of eternity. Like, no. I have a question. How often has it actually made you feel any better when somebody tells you that your suffering isn't that bad because you have a long life ahead of you? It almost makes it sound worse in many cases, especially if you're dealing with a chronic condition. It doesn't actually distract from the problem in any meaningful way. I'll say things to say to your sub for 400. Tucker White, thank you for the 50 bits. Let me take a wild guess. It's meaningful because Jesus. Like, okay, hold on. That almost sounds like, when you say things you say to your sub, it sounds like you're going, not only is your suffering small and finite compared to what I could do to you, your suffering is totally meaningful. Now finish for me. Okay, that's how that reads to me. That's how that read to me. Maybe that's not what you were going for, but that's definitely how it read to me. Driv, thank you very much for redeeming your points for an Ara. You fucking monster. God had a I'm gonna make you suffer and burn in hell kink. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. God fetishizes barbecue.
Now that is a very controversial statement because of how much insane suffering there is in the world.
Yeah, and it's all because of your God, according to your religion. Not a great look.
Every time something horrific happens, an interviewer will say, meaningless. And that is what it looks like. That's what it looks like. See, look at it. This is meaningless. These 23 kids in India, What did they do? They ate lunch, and they're dead. Or Moore, Oklahoma, or Boston. It's everywhere. Now we've got the internet. We've got no excuse for not crying every day.
Or we could not do that and put our mental health first. That's a thing we could do. Yeah, this dude is getting very animated talking about other people suffering. And let me say this right now. While suffering is certainly a thing one can utilize, channel to improve themselves, make their life marginally better in certain ways, the idea that suffering is necessary, to me, is ludicrous. There's this very strange proclivity in a lot of variations of Christian faith that suffering is something to be fetishized almost. It is something to be incredibly proud of. It leads to a lot of the awkward conservative mindsets that we get around shit like hard work. The things that you get are better if you suffer through them, if you suffer for them. And I just don't agree with that ideology. I think working towards a world where fewer people have to suffer is better than fetishizing a world where people do suffer and saying that it means something great in the grand scheme of things. A statement that is comforting to nobody and useless to all.
Those who weep, right? If you don't have a theology that can cope with the internet horrors, you just better check out or get one. This text says, our light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight. It doesn't say will be followed by an eternal weight of glory. That would be good enough. That would be good enough. That's not what it says. Kat ergodzomai. Forgive the Greek. I just love it. Got to dump it out every now and then. You don't need to know that. The word means produce, prepare, cause to bring about. I'll venture this. Every millisecond of your pain from the fallen nature or fallen man, every millisecond of your misery in the path of obedience is producing a peculiar glory you will get because of that.
All right, so first of all, Tucker White, thank you very much for the 50 bits. Not to mention that one more often than not, that line of bullshit comes from rich assholes or the kids of rich assholes. True. Second thing, all right, so here's where we get to the meat of that ideology. The idea that your suffering is not only good, but it's being done for the purpose of what? You'll have a peculiar glory when you get to heaven? Why should I care? Why should I want a peculiar glory? You literally said that just having eternal life afterwards is good enough. So if that's good enough, then why do we care about it being a particular ingratiation of that? Why couldn't we just have a world that doesn't have that suffering? And before you say, well, it's man's fault because man made the fall happen, my counter argument to that is very simple. I don't care. Because God, as an omniscient, omnipotent being, created the scenarios that led to the fall of man. They were a feature, not a bug. Man didn't make cancer. That's a God thing. God did that. At least if you are to ascribe to Christian theology of any variety. Then, yeah, that's a God thing. God is a Mary Sue created by people who need excuses. That is certainly one way to look at it if we want to go down the full-on anti-SJW route. Bit cringe, but okay. You prefer super hell? I don't think I'd prefer any hell. I think the idea of hell is also ludicrous in its uselessness. Oh no! We're going to create a place that's there as a punishment for Satan. It's also a punishment for all of my people who I made lovingly. I engineered the scenarios in which they will not believe in me. I literally say in my book that I can harden the Pharaoh's heart, and yet hell is somehow a just thing. Never ask a Calvinist about whether or not it's just for their children to burn in it. made the mistake of asking that question once. Was pretty horrified with the answer. Let's go ahead and continue.
That's a very controversial statement, and I believe it. So that if anybody says to me that a believer's suffering was meaningless, I'll be quiet probably, because they're probably hurting really bad right now, and I'm going to wait and see when the right time is. But I'm going to come back.
The right time is never. I'm sorry, the right time is never. I used to be the type of person that would tell people that their suffering was part of God's grand plan. And believe me, the right time is absolutely not once ever. There's negative right times to engage in that rhetoric.
Back eventually and say, it wasn't meaningless. I don't care if it was cancer or criticism. I don't care if it was slander or sickness. It wasn't meaningless, because verse 17 says, my light, momentary, lifelong, total affliction is doing something.
Can you define what that thing is in any meaningful way? That would probably be a lot more helpful than the vacuous words of things like peculiar. Axolotls with cream, thank you for redeeming your points for an well. Pika says this guy's voice is causing me pain. Well, I'm sorry about that. It is causing me pain as well. But it's just kind of weird. He doesn't care if it's cancer? No, he doesn't care if it's cancer. All suffering is... Okay, so... Here's a fun syllogism. Things done in the pursuit of heaven are good. Things done for the glory of God are good, right? Okay, so things afflicted for those reasons are also good, because they're done towards that end. They're done for that purpose. This is an ideology that unironically stumbles into the, well, cancer is good because it makes you suffer. It's a weird pit of quicksand, but it's a pit of quicksand that I think this type of ideology can call home. And yeah, when you get down to it, Yahweh is a psychotic super Nazi. I don't know if I'd use the word Nazi there, but he's definitely psychotic. I can agree with that.
It's doing something. It's not meaningless. Of course you can't see what it's doing. This is the main unseen thing verse 18 is talking about, I think. What's the unseen you're supposed to look at? You're supposed to look at the promise of God in verse 17 that says your pain is doing something for you.
Okay.
You can't see it, you can't feel it. Either you see it with the eyes of faith, believe it because the text says it, or you lose heart.
So, okay. I have no problem with people having faith in a deity, but when you start putting your faith to this extreme, when you start getting to this point, you start being able to kind of excuse some pretty terrible atrocities, because, I mean, they're all done functionally for the glory of God, right? Darth Crystal, thank you for resubscribing. It has been 3 months. You'd prefer an indifferent God to the Christian God? Yeah, a deistic God would be a lot better in this case. Masochists agree the pain is definitely doing something for them, all right? Well, yeah, but we're not here to talk about how a masochist shoots rope. This is the kind of rhetoric, this is the kind of thought process that led me to unironically tell a friend of mine after they had been assaulted that there was a purpose for it, that there was a reason that happened. This type of rhetoric sounds, on the surface, especially if you've been a Christian for a long time, it sounds pretty par for the course. I know he says that it's a controversial statement, but it's really not within the audience you're speaking to. Statements are only as controversial as the audience to which they're spoken. So yeah, your religion made you sound like a total piece of shit. Yeah, it did. It literally, that's a thing that things that I said, literally informed by this kind of thought process. It's one reason why I don't find these statements to be necessarily vapid. I find them to be loaded, and in one of the worst ways. And again, if we get to the factual nature of things, not just the conversation in general about suffering, but the actual facts on the board, we find ourselves with a person who says, oh no, I'll wait for the right time to tell somebody that their suffering meant something great. When there really isn't a right time for that. And over and above that, the promises that are being given are Well, believe it on faith. Use the eyes of faith, whatever the hell those are. Use the ability to have faith in the text, which, again, the Bible's not exactly very reliable when it comes to things like prophecies, so I don't know why someone would have that exactly. Like, I don't know why somebody would follow a text that routinely gets shit wrong. But those are the things required here to wrap your head around the idea that other people's suffering is good. It's just like when we covered Daughter of Virtue, and we got the olive press analogy, as if people were just tools for God to, you know, have fun with. But I digress.
And I'm going to close with John the Baptist as an illustration. I love and groan. My name's John. I love all the Johns in the world. That's a weird thing to say in the city.
Yeah, the Porta Johns are not, I really don't like the Porta Johns. Tucker says, here's a perfect example. Sure, you were brought here against your will, made to pick cotton all day, whipped for the most minuscule mistake and given no legal way out, but trust me, your suffering as a slave is good for you. Those exact things were said to the slave population of the United States.
If I were good enough, I would. But I love John the Baptist, and I love his story, and I weep over the way it ended. So let me just take 3 minutes and tell you the way it ended, and we'll stop. He's in prison, and you know why he's in prison. Jesus said, there is no man born of woman greater than John the Baptist. Jesus said that. He's in prison. You know why he's in prison? Because he looked the king right in the face and said, you can't have her. She is Philip's wife. You're an adulterer. Well, that's a very dangerous thing to say to a king who has absolute authority over anybody to do anything he wants. So he puts him in jail. He's scared of him, so he hasn't killed him.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. That's kind of yikesy. That's kind of yikes as shit. I'm sorry. If somebody's betrothed or somebody's wife or somebody's partner doesn't want to be with you and they don't have an active agreement, yeah, that's bad.
But there he sits, and now it's Herod's birthday. And he gives a party for himself. Throws in a little bonus, a little sexual bonus for his guests. Has his stepdaughter dance. Really, really pleasing dance. Turns everybody on. They're all loving it. And when she's done, he knows she's pleased the guests, so to reward her, he says, I'll give you whatever you want, up to half my kingdom. She goes to her mom, Herodias, who hates John the Baptist, and says, what should I ask for? And her mom says, ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Okay. She walks back in. Everybody's listening. What's she going to ask for? I want right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Silence in the room. King can't take it back. Okay. He whispers to his attendant.
That is starting to sound like Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame. So, by the way, Cyrus, any thoughts on Elon Musk joining Twitter's board of directors? Yeah, I think buying yourself into a company is fucking stupid. I think it's bullshit that you can do that. But anyway, forget the head, go for the cut. Okay, we're just. He's not said anything like controversial at this point. He's just telling the story as is. So that's why we're not responding right now.
Wondering how the kingdom is going to come. And the door opens and two guys are standing there, one of them with a sword. It's just a moment of silence, doesn't know what's going on. And the one with the sword says, come over here and kneel down, and if you struggle, we'll bind you. And John says, what happened? What's going on? And the executioner says, King's daughter danced in the party, and she asked for your head, and we've come to get it. We're going to take your head. That's the last thing he has to think about in the next 20 seconds.
That is kind of a bullshit way to die, though, isn't it? Oh my god, that impression was spot on. Thanks, Drake. This one is too.
I am the face of a soulless corporation. Behold, we can govern ourselves. Fuck Ron DeSantis.
Kneel down if you struggle, we'll bind you. Yeah, it sounds like a kink thing. But also, at the same time, I do agree, like, this is fucking sad. The idea that a person, merely by being affiliated with royalty, has the ability to kill you because they got a bunch of old men at a party off. Like, that's fucking gross as shit. Also, pretty pink one. Thank you for the follow.
What would you think? Everything in me says, God, what can be more meaningless than a party where a girl dances, asks for the greatest man on the planet's head, and within 2 verses of the Bible, he's dead? God!
Yeah, that's literally stupid. There is no reason to kill a person that way. There's no meaning in that. You literally just died so that a bunch of rich jerkwads could get off. That's it. That's it. That is meaningless.
Meaningless. Absolutely meaningless way to die. Nothing glorious about it. It stinks to high heaven. I'll tell you, I hope God in his mercy put into John's head in those 20 seconds this light momentary affliction is working for you an eternal weight of glory.
And then everybody clapped. Oh my god. Undyne fan, thank you for the follow. Also, Darth Shadow, thank you for redeeming your points for an fucking monster. But yeah, no, okay. How is that supposed to be comforting? How? I have to ask the question. How is it supposed to be comforting? Sure, eternal life afterwards might be comforting, maybe. I don't think that the way eternal life works in the Bible is very comforting at all. You either go to hell where you get burned forever, maybe, depending on the translation, depending on if we're taking bits of Apocalypse of Peter seriously or not. But if you go to heaven, you worship God all the time and your free will's stripped away, so you're no different than a slave. Like, really, none of the options are good. They all kind of suck. And deicide's not an option. You can't, like, make a Hunger Games-esque uprising in heaven to claim the territory for yourself and then secure the pearly gates over, against zombies or some shit. No, you just have to sit there and worship all day, every day, as if that's supposed to be fun or good. So also, I believe the suffering is part of humanity, but should also work to reduce it. Yeah, no, I agree. But this suffering fetishizing, this using this entire thing, this is meaningless, but actually it was very meaningful because God said so. The idea that all the terrible things that you go through in your life can actually be good, so long as a dude in authority says so. That's literally how this comes across. Flip Flop Panty Drop says, life is already hard, why make it harder? Life is difficult, so get an erection.
And so I believe the main because for not losing heart in this text is that none of your suffering is meaningless.
So this is where we have the ideology shift here. From my perspective, you should take heart that there is points in time that are not suffering. Take heart in your life in spite of your suffering. The ideological shift here is dude wants you to take heart because of the suffering. The suffering is supposed to be the glorified thing in his ideology. Whereas in something like mine, I would rather you take heart in the times where you don't have to suffer, or the times where through suffering you manage to earn something important, or even more important, you manage to find little bits of happiness despite the suffering. The suffering is not the good thing, the thing to be gloried, and yet that is the exact opposite in his ideology. The problem is that it goes from you can learn from suffering to a kind of cultural apologia for the suffering inflicted. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the idea that you can learn from suffering, I can get behind. But the idea that suffering is necessary, and the idea that suffering is good because it is part of God's grand plan. Those ideas are things that I have huge issue with. I don't agree with the statements as presented. I don't agree with the conversation. I think that an all-good God would work to reduce the suffering in the world, not tell people to revel in it because he's got a really good reward and a treat for them later. He guarantees you, just read his book. Just read his book. He definitely has a reward for you, according to him. You can believe him, right? Just like that flood that didn't happen that he said happened. Or the cities that were supposed to be felled that didn't get felled. You know, all the other things in the Bible that didn't actually happen. So I don't know why we're going back to flagellants. Anywho. And before I reckon that the suffering of this present time is not worthy compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. Well, let's see if he continues with that. Let's see.
It'll feel that way. That's why verse 18 says, don't look at what's seen. I mean, you just stand there watching that happen. You just stand there watching that happen. You're going to kill him. He didn't do anything. She just danced. Don't do that. It's meaningless. This is totally crazy. This is an absurd novel. This doesn't happen.
This should just be an argument against the efficacy of monarchy in general, not like the pro-suffering apologia he's trying to make it out to be.
That's the way you talk, right? What your eyes are telling you is meaningless. Don't look to what is seen. When your mom dies, when your kid dies, when you got cancer at 40, when a car careens into the sidewalk and takes her out, don't say, it's meaningless. It's not. It's working for you an eternal weight of glory. Therefore, do not lose heart, but take these truths, all the ones you've heard in every message, and day by day, focus on them. Preach them to yourself every morning. Get alone with God and preach his word into your mind until your heart sings with confidence that you...
So literally convince yourself desperately that this has meaning and this has a purpose. This isn't the same thing as like jumping on the hand grenade to stop your fellow troops from being killed. This isn't that. You see, in a situation where your suffering earns you something in the real world, in many cases, there were no other ways around that. There's no other way to save your troops in that situation unless you had a good metal box handy, things like that. It doesn't work that way for the Christian God, though. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. He not only has the power to create a scenario where you don't have to go through all this suffering, but he should be creative enough to envision one so that he doesn't have an excuse for not doing so. All of this apologia for suffering in the world, the idea that it's good actually because it's gonna give you a special dog treat in heaven, this doesn't actually get us anywhere. It doesn't help anybody in the here and now. And I would honestly say that this kind of rhetoric is traumatic. I say that as somebody who used to deliver this kind of rhetoric to people and knowing it was traumatic to them. And yet, this is the cornerstone of an ideology. Not all Christians adhere to it, but he does. And he wants his audience to as well. And that's enough of a problem. Chaotic Kitten, understandable if you need to take a self-care break, though the stream is going to be ending soon anywho, so if that helps, I hope it helps. But with that all said, if you guys enjoyed this video or have any thoughts, let me know in the comment section below. I'm sure there's a lot of conversation that happens where this is concerned. Everybody's preacher has gone through this spiel at least once. But with that said, as always, if you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already over on YouTube, follow over on Twitch if you haven't already, and if you want to support the channel, there's lots of ways to do so. Patreon being one of the main ones. You also can hop into the merch store and other various places to grab stuff that helps the channel. All of the links are going to be in the description, including links to every artist that helps make this channel work. With that said, everyone, as always, insert end of video tagline here.